Everyone, Natalie Edmond here, she, her pronouns, and coming to you to talk a little bit about my sprouting of this Anti-Racism Revolution membership site. I spent much of this winter hibernating. I did workshops from my home and did therapy from my home and, went out here and there, but it was really a winter of rest and restoration. I love how the NAP ministry really encourages rest as a form of resistance, particularly for Black and brown bodies. And so in that hibernation, I started to think about this anti-racism work that I'm deeply involved in and committed to. And all the hundreds of workshops I've done over the last couple of years with so many different group practices and community groups and religious groups and schools and institutions. And I thought, what have I seen? What are the themes? And what kind of community can I create to help foster and meet people where they're at in this revolution? I think about my first workshop, which was probably in 2016 or 2017, probably 2017, and it was about the Black Lives Matter movement. I love how the co-founders, these three queer Black women, and they talked about it's not a moment, it's a movement. And it's 5 years later, and it's still not just a moment, it's a movement. So I want to create a community where people are intentional about how they are with each other, about bringing all kinds of questions, all kinds of humility, about exploring themselves as a racial being, and about exploring who they want to be in the world, what kind of ancestor they want to be. I think about my new logo, and I'm excited to show it to you. You've probably seen a little preview of it. And I feel like it so embodies where I am and how I have changed in just 3 years. So I started my group practice, Mindful and Multicultural Counseling, in 2019, after having been in solo practice for a couple of years and after having left big organizations. And while my group practice was founded on anti-racism and anti-oppression, the logo kind of was a more subtle version of what I was trying to put out there in the world. This brand new logo that really centers Anti-Racism Revolution has a vibrance to it. It has a face to it. It still has the yin yang of us holding multiple truths. So I just want to hit some highlights about what I hope we will co-create in this space. And this is a starting point because our needs will change as we go deeper into the conversation. Some things I know to be true is that unexamined whiteness is oppressive. I think about the ways in which unexamined whiteness shows up in spaces. It shows up in colorblindness, it shows up in professionalism and who gets to define what professionalism is. It shows up in how people are represented. It shows up in power and privilege and who takes up space and who gets to have their feelings and who gets the voice and who is unheard. It shows up in lots of subtle everyday microaggressions, as well as the huge, huge overt racism. And so I want to find out, how do we all get free? How does every single one of us get free? For all those who have shouted all lives matter, yeah, I believe that too. So what do we need to do to make that feel real? On a cultural level, on an individual level, on an institutional level? How do we make sure that the people who are most vulnerable among us feel supported and heard and have more than enough to thrive, not just survive? So why a membership site? I want it to be more integrated. I want people to come as they are. Maybe you like webinars, maybe you like process groups. Maybe you can come live, maybe you like to listen to recordings. Maybe you want to build a community in your area or nationally about other people who are also having the same struggles. How do you regulate your nervous system? How do you talk to those people who have unexamined privilege and power, and as racial beings, they haven't built the muscles to be able to talk about that without getting defensive and oppressive. If white body supremacy is the air that we breathe, how do we start to change the air that we're breathing? How do we decenter whiteness so that you can be white-bodied, but not show up in oppressive ways? How do we change and challenge and disrupt the culture of whiteness? That is what is oppressive. I've met plenty of white-bodied people who are not only allies, but accomplices and co-conspirators. I have learned tremendously from those white accomplices. BIPOC people need to heal from racial harm. Everybody needs to heal from racial harm. But I think we need to learn strategies as clinicians, as healthcare providers, as parents, as educators, as nutritionists, right? What are these systems we've been trained in, that we've been socialized in, that we've been indoctrinated in, that continue to harm BIPOC people and all their intersecting identities? And how do we center those voices? How do we create treatment spaces, healing spaces? And perhaps BIPOC people need their own affinity group so they're away from the white gaze. The conversation is different when you're away from the white gaze. I can remember having started BIPOC affinity groups, or maybe they were called global majority, because BIPOC doesn't resonate for some people. Because who is not centered or decentered in Black, Indigenous, people of color phrase? How do we start to see BIPOC people not as a monolith, but as so many differing cultures and struggles and needs? When do we generalize and when do we personalize? When do we speak up and when do we take a backseat? If we've lost our voice because of oppression or our lack of power and privilege, how do we rediscover it? How do we reclaim it? How do we make sure that everyone is seen, particularly those with less power and privilege? How do we start to see how race and white body supremacy and racism shows up in just about every space unless they're intentionally trying to be anti-racist? So whether you are coming as an individual or as a team, whether you are a leader, a parent, just an individual who wants to be a good ancestor, you're welcome. And I love Mariam Kaba and the way that she talks about hope is a discipline. I saw these white hands and I thought, oh, why are there all these white hands showing up in this picture? And I thought, well, I'm going to reframe that as perhaps those are the budding allies and accomplices. Those who believe that their freedom is tied to collective liberation, that they understand that they are part of a collective and they're willing to do present day reparation and listen to the voices of those who tend to be unheard. I hope that you'll stay tuned. Next time, I'll talk a little bit about how I came to be an anti-racist consultant and why I call myself an anti-racist consultant versus a DEI consultant. I hope you are well. I hope your loved ones are well, and I wish you well on the journey. Take good care.